Last time, I went looking for the cheapest, most overlooked towns in South Carolina, and the response told me something. There are a lot more of you out there hunting for an affordable way into this state than I expected. So I went back to the data. I pulled county records, cost of living indexes from Best Places, and the Council for Community and Economic Research, Census ACS housing figures, and population data from Data USA and Home Snacks for 10 towns I did not cover the first time. These are towns in the Lowcountry, the Upstate, and right along the Georgia border, places most national outlets never mention because they are too small to show up in a statewide ranking, but too cheap to ignore once you actually pull the numbers. In some cases, what I found here is even more extreme than what turned up in Part 1. This is Part 2. 10 more South Carolina towns where the math just does not look real. Let's get into it. Manning is a small city of roughly 3,800 people, the county seat of Clarendon County, sitting just a few miles north of Lake Marion, what locals call South Carolina's Inland Sea. The lake has over 300 miles of shoreline, and it is right there at Manning's back door, with swimming, boating, fishing, and hiking all minutes from downtown. The town traces its history back to 1855, when the state legislature appointed a commission to purchase land for what was then called the Village of Manning, named after John Lawrence Manning, who served in the state legislature and later as governor. The town has survived its share of disasters. A large portion was destroyed during Potter's Raid in the closing days of the Civil War. A downtown fire leveled more buildings in 1895, and a tornado hit in 1915. It rebuilt every time, largely on the back of railroads, timber, and agriculture. The median property value in Manning today is around $157,600, with current listings ranging anywhere from $49,000 up to the high 300s, and roughly 60% of the housing stock owner occupied. Compare that median to Columbia, the state capital, sitting about 60 miles to the west, where the median home recently sold for $276,000. That is a gap of well over $100,000, and Manning is also within striking distance of Charleston and Myrtle Beach. The trade-off: just under 18% of Manning's population lives below the poverty line, and most households here get by with a single car, a sign of how limited local public transportation really is. But if lake access, a slower pace, and a 170-year history of rebuilding matter more to you than a long commute, Manning is worth a look. Hampton is a town of about 2,600 people, and it holds a record almost nobody outside Hampton County knows about. The Hampton County Watermelon Festival has been running every summer since 1939, and as of the most recent count, it is South Carolina's longest continually running festival. A full week of parades, seed-spitting contests, and barbecue cook-offs. The town and county are both named after Wade Hampton III, a Confederate general who later became South Carolina's governor, and the county itself was carved out of Beaufort County back in 1878. The original name was actually Hampton Courthouse, shortened later by the Postal Service. Several of Hampton's historic buildings, the American Legion Hut, the Bank of Hampton, the Hampton Colored School, and the Palmetto Theater, are listed on the National Register of Historic Places. 3 U.S. highways intersect right in town, routes 601, 278, and 363, and Savannah Hilton Head International Airport is about an hour away. The median home value in Hampton sits around $179,700. Savannah, Georgia is about 60 miles south down US 278, where the median home price runs close to $350,000. That's a gap approaching $170,000 for a 60-mile drive. The trade-off here is real. Hampton's unemployment rate sits at 14.2%, well above the national norm, and most residents make the hour drive to Charleston for shopping the town itself cannot support. Still, for a fraction of Savannah's price tag, you get a real downtown, 3 highways at your doorstep, and a festival tradition older than most of the people walking in it. Barnwell is a small city of about 4,600 people, just over 40 miles from Augusta, Georgia. The local economy here runs on a mix of education and healthcare, which together make up almost a fifth of employment, followed by manufacturing and a notable arts, entertainment, and food service sector tied to tourism passing through. The median household income in Barnwell has actually climbed to over $54,000 as of the most recent estimate. And home ownership sits at a healthy 64.4%, with an average commute of just under 25 minutes. The median property value here is roughly $145,300. Augusta's median home price is sitting around $299,000 right now, meaning Barnwell residents are paying roughly half of what their Georgia neighbors are for a 40-minute commute. The cost of living index in Barnwell is 79.3, nearly 21% below the national average. The trade-off: almost 24% of Barnwell's population lives in poverty, and the town's downtown has struggled to fully recover from the decline of its manufacturing base. But for retirees or remote workers who do not need that Augusta paycheck, Barnwell is a legitimate cross-border value play. Edgefield is a small town of around 4,400 people, just 23 miles from Augusta, Georgia, practically a suburb in terms of distance, but nothing like one in price. Edgefield County as a whole has a home ownership rate of over 80%, one of the highest in this entire countdown, with an average commute of about 26 minutes. Much of it people driving into Augusta for work in manufacturing, healthcare, or retail, the county's three biggest employers. The median home value in Edgefield is about $141,655, while that same drive into Augusta puts you at a median of $299,000. The cost of living index here is 79.7, and Edgefield actually scores an A+ on overall crime, ranking among the safer small towns in the area, according to local livability data. The trade-off is economic. Nearly a third of Edgefield's population, just over 31%, lives below the poverty line, and the job market outside of Augusta, commuting is thin. But 23 miles from a regional metro with A+ safety scores, an 80% homeownership rate, and a price tag under $142,000. That's a hard combination to find anywhere else in the state. Greenwood is a city of roughly 22,500 people in the South Carolina Upstate, home to Lander University and the annual South Carolina Festival of Flowers, which has drawn more than 80,000 visitors in a single season. The town grew up around the Greenville and Columbia Railroad, and its post office, established in 1837, is one of the oldest still operating in the country. Today, the local economy runs primarily on manufacturing, healthcare, and retail, and employment in Greenwood actually grew by nearly 4.5% in the most recent year measured. The median household income has climbed to just over $41,000, though home ownership still sits under 44%, reflecting a market with a large renter base. The median home value in Greenwood sits around $153,743. Greenville, just over 60 miles north, has a median sale price around $370,000 as of early 2026. That's a gap of more than $200,000 for an hour's drive. Greenwood is also within reach of Columbia and Augusta, Georgia, putting three metro job markets inside a 90-minute radius. The trade-off: Greenwood's overall crime grade sits in the 27th percentile for safety nationally, and about 22% of residents live in poverty. Still, a real university town with a real festival economy, growing employment, 60 miles from a boomtown, for under $154,000 is rare air. If you are finding these numbers as hard to believe as I did, hit subscribe. I am not done yet, and the next 4 towns get more extreme. Marion is a city of about 6,200 people, named after Francis Marion, the Revolutionary War general known as the Swamp Fox, who South Carolinians still claim as their own. Marion County's economy leans on education, health, and social services, which together make up over a fifth of local employment, followed by manufacturing and retail trade. The median home value in Marion is around $122,358. For homeowners, that translates to a manageable monthly housing cost relative to local income, even though that income itself is modest. Myrtle Beach, less than 2 hours east, has a median home price north of $318,000. That's nearly $200,000 in savings for a town inside day trip range of the beach. The trade-off: median household income in Marion sits around $30,000, well below the state average, and Marion County carries a severe wind event risk rating due to its hurricane exposure, with tens of thousands of properties facing some level of storm risk over the next 30 years. But for the price of a Myrtle Beach down payment, you could own a Marion home outright. Union is a city of about 8,000 people in the Upstate, the county seat of Union County, and a former textile hub that, like a lot of mill towns across the Carolinas, has spent the last few decades adjusting to a different economy. Union County's overall population sits at just under 27,000, and the housing vacancy rate runs over 13%, a sign of just how much slack exists in this market for a buyer willing to do some work. The median home value here is just $100,000. Flat. Spartanburg, the nearest major city, has a median home price of $274,900 as of the most recent housing report. That's a gap of nearly $175,000. The trade-off is significant. Union's poverty rate sits at 28.87%. The county's population has been gradually declining, and unemployment runs above 6%. This is not a town riding economic momentum, but for buyers who want to own a home for six figures, full stop, with a real upstate city less than an hour away, Union is one of the rawest numbers on this entire list. Still here at number 3? You're the kind of viewer who actually wants the math, not just the headline. Subscribe. I cover towns like this every week. Chester is a city of about 5,200 people, sitting directly on Interstate 77 in the Upstate, a straight shot north toward the North Carolina state line and into the Charlotte metro itself. The local economy still leans heavily on manufacturing, which accounts for roughly a fifth of employment, followed by education and health services, and then retail trade. The median home value in Chester is around $126,795. Charlotte, North Carolina's banking capital, has a median sale price of $435,000 as of the most recent quarter. That's a gap of more than $300,000 between Chester and a metro most people consider unreachable on a single income. The trade-off: Chester's population has declined nearly 9% since 2010, and the local economy has not fully recovered from manufacturing losses. But for remote workers who can keep a Charlotte paycheck while living an interstate exit away from it, Chester is one of the most extreme arbitrage plays in this entire series. Walterboro calls itself the front porch of the Lowcountry, and it earns the nickname: historic homes, a walkable downtown, and the Ace Basin Nature Preserve nearby, one of the largest undeveloped estuaries on the East Coast. The city sits just west of Interstate 95, about 48 miles from Charleston, and the median household income here runs around $48,000. Independent livability rankings give Walterboro high marks for cost of living and housing, but the same rankings grade it poorly on amenities, education, and employment, a pattern you see often in towns this size, where affordability and convenience pull in opposite directions. The median home value in Walterboro is around $152,805. Charleston is 48 miles east, where the median home price is sitting at $615,000 as of this spring. That's a gap of more than $460,000 for a 48-mile drive into one of the most expensive housing markets in the entire Southeast. The trade-off: Walterboro's crime rate runs above the state average, and the town scores poorly on amenities and education in those same independent livability rankings. But for less than a quarter of Charleston's median price, Walterboro puts you close enough to visit the Lowcountry coast on a weekend and still go home to a mortgage payment that makes sense. Kingstree is a small town of about 3,200 people, the county seat of Williamsburg County, and it holds the title of the most extreme value on this entire list. Per capita income here runs around $27,000, and the town actually sees a daytime population surge of over 70% thanks to commuters driving in for work, even though just over half the workforce both lives and works locally. The median home value here is approximately $104,700, with a cost of living index of 71.7, nearly 30% below the national average. Charleston is 55 miles southeast, the nearest city of any real size, while Charlotte, North Carolina, sits over 120 miles north. Charleston's median home price $615,000. That is a gap of more than $510,000 between Kingstree and a coastal market, less than an hour's drive away. No other comparison on this list comes close. The trade-off is steep. Nearly 30% of Kingstree's population lives below the poverty line, and outside of that Charleston commute, opportunity is genuinely limited. This is not a town for someone who needs convenience, but mathematically, for the cost of a Charleston down payment, you could own a Kingstree home with cash left over. That gap is the entire thesis of this series in one number. So why does this keep happening? Town after town, list after list. It is the same three forces I talked about in part 1, just playing out in a different corner of the state. Proximity without parity, towns sitting 20, 40, 60 miles from a booming metro, where the price tag has not caught up to the distance. Local incomes that price the housing, not transplant incomes. And remote work, which keeps making that gap usable for more people every year. None of these 10 towns are perfect. I am not going to pretend Kingstree's poverty rate or Chester's population decline are footnotes. They are real costs, and I would rather show you the full picture than just the part that sells. That is the whole point of this channel. I am not here to sell you a house. I am here to show you the math and let you decide if the trade-off works for your life. 10 more towns audited the same way as part 1. Some of these numbers are more extreme than anything I found the first time. Kingstree, Chester, and Walterboro in particular are gaps that are hard to find anywhere else in the Southeast. If you have been priced out of the coast or out of Charlotte, this is still happening. Right now, in towns most people have never heard of. Drop a comment and tell me which one from part 2 surprised you the most, and let me know if you want a part 3. If you missed part 1, it's linked above. I will see you in the next one.